if anything is going to save us, if anything is still capable of saving us, if it isn't our own humanity, I don't know what it is.
Welcome back to another episode of In the Meanwhile. I'm Marcus Harrison Green.
And I'm Nora Kenworthy. And I'm also roasting. It's really hot here.
It is, yes, it is like Satan's underwear or Satan's drawers hot, as my Southern grandma would say. We've got fans and AC off to ensure good sound quality, however. So today's episode is brought to you by what Nora likes to call hot podcasting.
That's right. It's like hot yoga, but with less movement and more jabbering. We basically just podcast until we pass out.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You got to listen for the sounds of sweat dripping slowly onto our microphones. If you're wondering whether the heat you feel is from the weather or from being inside the "this is fine" meme, you've come to the right place.
Aside from the heat, Marcus, how are you holding up?
Nora, I'm hanging in there. But speaking of heat, have you seen the news cycle lately?
Ugh.
It's just a nonstop inferno of the same soulless schools clogging the airwaves. And Nora, I got to say, I sincerely hope that none of these people go to hell. You know why?
Why?
I would prefer to never see these people again, ever. So, yeah, I was naive enough to think maybe, just maybe, the news would take a summer break.
Mhm.
We'll kick back. It'll touch some grass. Let us pretend the world isn't on fire for a minute. But no, it's the summer of ice cream trucks and ice deportations, our barbecues, beaches, and big bad bills. Yes, that is still a thing, even though many have moved on to the next shiny new object.
So true. Hiking and hurricanes, tree forts and treason, lemonade and losing USAID. I don't know if that works.
I just I have to say that it sounds like a, like, depressing version of "These are a few of my favorite things." Right?
That's so true.
It's like hiking in hurricane, street forts and trees. Anyway, I the listeners, they get the idea. It is the summer of watching our democracy slip and slide away. We just
Oh,
got
yeah.
had to go with one more pun. One more pun there.
We're dishing
Anyway.
out puns today like Trump's budget bill dished out cuts.
But unlike our puns, Trump's bill is anything but funny. It's economic ruin for Americans and tax breaks for billionaires, all wrapped up in one extraordinary, messy package.
So true. And though many of us want to forget it already, it's dismantling and erecting impossible barriers to nearly every kind of support program that we have in the US, from food and nutrition assistance to Medicaid and Medicare.
It's also worth noting that the bill does this against the wishes of the vast majority of Americans, whether they are Republican, Democrat, socialist, libertarian, whatever. For example, earlier this year, the organization Data for Progress found that there was not a single congressional district, not a single one, in the US where more than 15% of voters actually wanted cuts to Medicaid. And nationally, only 8% of voters total support these cuts. There are literally more people more people who believe that Elvis and Tupac are alive, Nora, than want these cuts to Medicaid and Medicare. I mean, my God.
So true. So, to help us make sense of all of this, we have an amazing guest today. Matthew Cortland is a lawyer, a disability rights and public health policy advocate, a senior resident fellow at Data for Progress, and a former director of policy and legislative affairs for Be a Hero. They've worked on numerous policy initiatives and have been featured in stories in the New York Times, NPR, Politico, to name just a few. As a person with disabilities and chronic illnesses, Matthew is alive today because of Medicaid, and in spite of repeated attempts by insurance companies to deny their care. They describe their work in the following terms. As a chronically ill patient, I'm working towards the recognition of healthcare as a human right. As a disabled lawyer, I'm working towards the expansion of meaningful and enforceable disability rights. And as a human being, I'm working towards a more just society that leaves no one behind.
And for the past few months, Matthew has been fighting relentlessly alongside patients and disability advocates to preserve access to Medicaid, Medicare, and other life saving programs that were facing enormous cuts under Trump's budget reconciliation bill. As a key advisor to the group Little Lobbyists, which brings young people with disabilities to Washington to advocate on their own behalf, Matthew has accompanied families and children as they put their own bodies on the line to demand health justice. Matthew knows firsthand both the hard fought victories and tremendous losses of the past few years and months when it comes to protecting health as a human right in the U.S. And we are so excited to have them here with us today to talk more about that fight. Matthew, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. It is fantastic to be with both of you.
Awesome. Well, I want to start out by asking you, Matthew, you've been involved in advocacy on behalf of disabled and very sick kids for a long time now. Can you share a little bit about how you got into that work and why it matters to you personally?
Yeah, I started out as a very sick kid. Um, I I don't disclose my entire problem list in the jargon of the biomedical complex, industrial complex, but I have been public about some stuff. Like I'm very public about having Crohn's disease, which is a kind of inflammatory bowel disease. But there are also people who have called up my pharmacy, called up my hospital, called up my doctor's offices, impersonating me, using information they gleaned from what I had put out publicly on the internet. So I'm very careful about what I disclose publicly these days. But I have Crohn's disease. It's a kind of inflammatory bowel disease. I've had it since I was a small child. I didn't really have access to medical care as a child until I was 18 and could make medical decisions for myself. And I dived in to healthcare. I feel like I really got dumped into the deep end of the pool as a college student who really didn't know anything, and got passed around. It was a fairly complicated case. Doctors didn't want to take care of me. I got passed up the chain. In Massachusetts, we say got sent to Boston. I got sent to Mass General Hospital, MGH, which I didn't know at the time. They refer to themselves like it's supposed to be a joke. They don't mean it as a joke, as man's greatest hospital.
Wow.
And The House of God, a book called The House of God, is largely about MGH and the type of people you will still find there. But the short version is, once I was a patient of a person whose full title included professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and attending physician at Massachusetts General Hospital, one of the most prestigious and well-regarded hospitals in the world. And they prescribed treatment for me. My insurance company tried to kill me in response. This was before the Affordable Care Act. And, my GI doc at the time, a medication was failing me, a medication called Remicade. You might have seen the TV commercials. Remicade is derived from a mouse protein. It's built on a mouse protein, to oversimplify. And when you inject a mouse protein into your body regularly, something can happen. It's called immunogenicity. Your immune system recognizes that the mouse protein is a thing it should attack. Again, I'm oversimplifying immunology. I am not an immunologist. But that happened. And when that happens, the medication really stops working. And so my GI doc wanted to move me to a new medication that was on market, meaning FDA said it's safe and effective. You can sell it to the pharmaceutical company that makes it, but it wasn't on label, meaning FDA had not approved it for my specific kind of disease. And so my insurance company denied the prior authorization request. Prior authorization request is just a fancy way of saying when your doctor goes and begs your insurance company to let them practice medicine to help you. They denied that. And then when the next step there is that you appeal the denial. Cigna at first said that they didn't get the appeal via, the postal mail. And so it got faxed into them and they said they didn't get the fax. And so then I faxed in the appeal package and the fax receipt, and they said they didn't get that. And so I sent it USPS, certified mail return receipt requested, the green card that used to be in more post offices. I am dating myself with reference to the green card, but someone in the mailroom actually has to sign a physical piece of card from USPS and send it back to you. And it's proof of delivery, including in a court of law. And at that point, they acknowledged that they got the appeal package, but then they said my doctor wasn't authorized to submit an appeal on my behalf. And so, again, I am not a lawyer at this point in time. I have no formal training in any of this stuff, but I'm reading through the handbook from Cigna, and it says in plain text in black and white, your doctor is presumptively, authorized to appeal on your behalf. You don't need to provide special permission. So I copied that and sent it into Cigna, and then they pretended not to get that. So this campaign of stonewalling went on for 2.5 months, and I was very sick. I had lost somewhere between 40 and 50 pounds. I was not able to eat food. I was vomiting constantly. I was in incredible pain, and someone got me a lawyer. I don't even remember how that happened. My memory of that is fuzzy. I was just in so much pain all of the time. And I told my story to that lawyer, and the next day he sent a demand letter he faxed to Cigna a letter that said, unless you approve Matthew's medication, which has been prescribed by a professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and an attending physician at MGH, man's greatest hospital, I will file suit on the following grounds. And then the following day, after he sent that in by the close of business, they had approved the prior authorization. So that changed the course of my life. And I realized that if I was going to survive, I needed to understand both the healthcare service and delivery system much better than I did, because I didn't really understand how any of it worked. And I needed to know how to sue insurance companies. So I almost said I abandoned my graduate program. I was at Teachers College at Columbia doing developmental psychology, which had been my dream. I was doing graduate school in DevPsych, and I was forced essentially to leave that by the insurance shenanigans and so on. And I went to Boston University's Graduate School of Public Health for a few years. And then I went to law school at what was then called the George Mason University School of Law, and has since been rebranded the Scalia School of Law.
Ooh. That's a rough one to have on the CV.
My CV still says George Mason University School of Law. It will never say the name of the hateful, vile, despicable, racist, eugenicist coward whose name now graces that institution.
Yeah, I am all for dead naming in that particular sense. Yes.
It's a limited exception to my personal policy as well. It sounds like we're on the same page. I went through that, and I was in law school and looking at what I wanted to do next. And two things became really clear to me really quickly. It was going to be really hard for me to practice law in a traditional career path just because of my chronic illnesses. And there were a lot of people, it's not a scalable solution to send everyone with a chronic illness to public health school and law school. Just as a societal solution, it doesn't scale. Right. And so I thought, well, if I can work on these problems at a higher, 40,000 foot overview on a policy level, that's where I eventually arrived. I did some retail advocacy, sort of lawyer-client, helping individual disabled folks navigate the system, trying to get SNAP benefits, WIC benefits, SSI, SSDI. These are the programs that we sort of laughingly call in this country the safety net, which implies that they provide safety or that they form an actual net, neither of which are true. But I realized after a little while of doing that work, there were too many starfish on the beach, right? It's that old story. Kid picks up a starfish on the beach, throws it back into the water. Old guy approaches and says, "What are you doing? There are too many starfish." And kid said, "Well, I made a difference to that starfish." For me, the knowledge that there were all these other starfish that by helping one person, I didn't have the capacity to help, couldn't help, weighed too heavily on me. And that's why I got into the sort of policy advocacy you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's something that really resonates with all of us. I mean, you've said in the past that policy for disabled people in particular is largely a life and death issue. And I think we're seeing that unfold in front of our eyes in particularly acute ways right now. With so many folks who are already navigating economic precarity and racism and environmental harm, how do you see disability justice intersecting with broader movements for racial and economic justice and in these policy arenas?
I do not know. Everything is on fire. We are losing, it feels like, across the board. And in a country that was founded on the genocide of indigenous peoples and the enslavement of peoples kidnapped from another continent and forcibly transported here, in a country built on those foundations, it's never fully a surprise when everything is on fire, but the magnitude, the sheer scope and scale of what is happening means, a few things. One, I'm out of the prediction business. I realized I don't have a mental model that is sufficiently both random and pessimistic enough to account for what is likely to happen in this country these days, right? Like, I I don't expect good things. I expect bad things. And I've gotten some of it right? Like vaccines, for example. It became pretty clear when the regime announced Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as their pick for HHS secretary that vaccine availability was in trouble.
Yeah.
But I don't know where we go, what happens next. I know that there are powerful, deep-pocketed, I mean, not just millions, but billions of dollars available to them, players who don't want to see people who are interested in a better world for the most of us, as opposed to this current system that we are accelerating, where wealth and privilege and like life itself is accreted to the top 1%, transferred from the 99% of us to a handful of billionaires. But given the pace and scale and scope, and also the structural and advantages that they've built for themselves, I'm not sure where we're going. I know we can't keep doing what we've been doing because we've been losing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, on to a cheerier topic here. No, no. I mean, you said that you don't expect uh, good things here in the near future. So, what do you want families who rely on Medicaid and Medicare to know in the months and years to come in terms of what's important in the fight going forward?
We have lost a number of big fights badly. And the Trump regime and MAGA and Maha is an explicitly eugenicist, explicitly white supremacist project that has as its aim the death, the murder of people who don't fit their very narrow conception, white, wealthy, some flavor, some version of what they call Christianity. It's sort of a Christian nationalism. People who don't fit into that box are being targeted by policies, by pronouncements, by a public narrative that really devalues our lives. And, if you're listening to this, I'm a pollster. It's my day job. I work at a progressive public opinion research firm and think tank called Data for Progress. And I see a lot of public opinion data, and I don't have polling specific to your audience, but I am guessing if you are listening to me talk right now, you are more informed about what is happening in the United States politically, economically, socially than the vast, vast, vast majority of Americans. And so part of this is there's an education deficit. People don't know what's happening. My inbox today, we are talking on July 15th, the vote on Trump's, I call it a murder budget because I don't believe in adopting the propaganda of my enemies.
Yeah, the appropriate title.
Right? Trump's murder budget has already been voted on and passed and signed into law. My inbox today has interview requests. Hey, do you have anyone who can explain what this bill means for Medicaid? Right? The time for those discussions was before federal legislation was approved out of the House and the Senate and then signed by the regime, cutting $1 trillion from Medicaid. Mm-hmm. What I will say is we have an opportunity right now to inform people. And so if you were someone listening to this and you know what's happening with Medicaid, if you know that Medicare is also in jeopardy, if you know that SNAP has been cut, and please, dear God, call it SNAP, don't call it food stamps. That's the pollster in me. SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is the rebranded, renamed program that used to be called food stamps. It was officially renamed in federal law in the year 2008. And there are still people, still organizations, still leaders, still elected officials calling it food stamps. And what I can tell you is more voters support SNAP than support food stamps, because I did the polling. Data for Progress. We did that polling.
Yeah, I gotta ask you: is it similar to how more people support the Affordable Care Act than support Obamacare? Is it that stark of a contrast, or?
So I was going there. You're just too quick for me. Okay. You're telegraphing. You're predicting my moves. What we see is how we talk about this stuff really matters, to your point, right? How we talk about this stuff really, 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 really matters. So with, and this is data that we first ran in 2023, in March of 2023. It was a survey that was fielded from March 10th to March 12th, survey of 1,208 likely voters. And we did a split test. We asked folks, half the folks were randomly assigned to be asked if they supported increasing SNAP benefits. The other half were randomly assigned to being asked whether or not they supported increasing food stamps benefits. And we found a 19-point advantage for SNAP framing over food stamps framing. 19 points. It is really hard to find anything that has a 19-point swing. Now, to your Marcus, your fantastic point about Obamacare and the ACA. In the same vein, a thing we've been struggling with during this fight is what the hell is Medicaid called? Because states have different names for Medicaid. I am alive because of a program that Massachusetts calls Mass Health, MASSHEAL, Health, HEALTH. I can totally spell. But other states call it other things. Badger Care. Badger Care is what Wisconsin calls Medicaid. And so we looked at Data for Progress. We did a lot of polling that was specifically geared towards Medicaid defense because we could see the attacks coming, and really tried to figure out how to talk about Medicaid in a way that normal folks who don't listen to this podcast and who haven't read your amazing work don't understand, don't have any context for, they're not familiar with it. And so how do you talk about this stuff in a way that gets through? And what we found is that voters in every congressional district, according to a DFP model in this country, oppose Medicaid cuts. Because I am deeply familiar with Medicaid, we also asked about home care, which was a topic that was neglected by some of the other public opinion research out there. People don't know that Medicaid pays for home care. Basically, no other insurance company, including Medicare, will pay for home care over any significant length of time. When you're on Medicare and you're on home care, you have a clock. It's much less than a year, and you're burning through days. And when you get to the last day, that's it. Medicare won't pay anymore. Medicaid will pay for home care. And when we asked likely voters if they opposed cuts to home care, you see even less support for home care cuts than you do for Medicaid cuts, because people understand, even if they're not policy wonks, that it is better to live in your own home with your own family, your own spouse, your own kid, with your own mom or dad, than it is to live in a nursing home or a long-term hospital. And so the part of the problem, though, is people don't know that Medicaid is what's providing their health care. In the same way, a lot of folks don't know that Obamacare is the Affordable Care Act, which is what's providing them health care. And I think, if I'm honest with you, if I'm truly honest with you, I think part of this confusion is by design, right? In the same way that there are two similarly named programs administered by the Social Security Administration for disability. There's SSDI and there's SSI, and they are different programs. And even people who are on one or the other often don't know which one, because they are deliberately confusingly named, in my opinion. They're like...
Or like Medicare and Medicaid being quite similar in how they're named.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, one of the things that was really eye-opening for me is going to Congress to advocate and talking to staffers who did not know the difference between Medicaid and Medicare. And these weren't, it wasn't like I was talking to the foreign affairs staffer. I was talking to the person whose portfolio included Medicaid and or Medicare. Usually they go together, healthcare, sort of the entire sector. And that was truly mind-blowing for me. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised at the time. I didn't have this data. But, when we looked in April of 2025, in states whose Medicaid program is not called Medicaid, because there are states that do just call it Medicaid, but in states that call it something else, about 6 in 10 voters correctly identify that it is a Medicaid program. 38% of likely voters are unable to do so. And that's a significant chunk of people. So we have a branding problem. It's a crass way to think about it, and if you were someone who is familiar with this stuff, part of what you can do is talk to your people about it. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to, your community, whatever that community looks like for you. Because another thing that we find at Data for Progress, when we ask people about this, who do you trust to give you information? What sources of information do you consider to be trustworthy? We also ask, where are they getting their information? And in 2025, that list is sort of personally terrifying for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the media, and I feel your pain.
Do you work for Facebook now? Because I thought we all worked for Meta now.
Jeez, that's too close to home. I will, Matthew. I want to ask you this because I've, listeners of our podcast know that I'm a non-religious person. I do not believe in some deity. I believe when we're dead, we're done. But I gotta say, meeting you, talking with you, you are maybe making me a believer that God that maybe they do exist, in the sense that I used to pray that the left would have its own version of Frank Lutz, the Republican pollster and communications personnel. And my God, you're manna.
Are you available?
Manna from heaven.
Hireable?
We'll talk after the show. But
I have. Oh my God! No, do you have Are you bugging me? Are you secretly an NSA op? What's happening here?
I just do my research. I don't do the, and very intuitive, but yeah, no.
For folks who don't know, Frank Luntz, and there is so much on YouTube. There's a PBS documentary that focuses on his work. Frank Luntz is a Republican operative who uses public opinion research data to rebrand things like what? The estate tax, which is the tax wealthy estates pay upon the death of that person before the money moves on to the next generation or wherever it's going. He rebranded it as the death tax. Brilliant, simple, effective. And for a time, because he rebranded it that, the death tax was repealed. It was a bit of a budget gimmick trick, and it created an opportunity for billionaires to move money while it was phased out. He rebranded global warming as climate change. He rebranded oil drilling as energy exploration. He is responsible, culpable morally for the deaths of untold hundreds, millions of people on this planet. And we need to be better. It's like you're, I don't even have a sports analogy. It's like you're showing up to play. My brain is breaking. It's like a Major League Baseball team versus little leaguers, right? In terms of messaging, that's the disparity. And, there are people on our side, I'm hand waving our side. There are people who have tried, academics. There's a guy named George Lakoff who wrote a book called Don't Think of an Elephant. Also wrote a longer book called Moral Politics, right? Who has said this sort of cognitive linguistic framing stuff is really important in Democrats, liberals, progressives, people who don't believe in things like a murder budget need to be much better at it. And I shouldn't say this on a podcast. I'm going to do it anyway. Fuck it. I begged the field, begged the field to not call it the one big beautiful bill, because I think it's a bad idea to like adopt the propaganda of the enemies who are trying to kill our people. I begged people to stop calling them quote unquote work requirements, either in the Medicaid context or the SNAP context. And, what do we call it instead? Call it a job loss penalty, because what they want to do is if you lose your job, they want to take your health care away. If you lose your job, you lose your Medicaid. Tap into loss aversion. Tap into the common experience that people all over this country have of getting laid off, or something happens, that the plant shuts down, the bakery closes, they get that letter in the mail that says it's a COBRA letter, and it says, for the low cost of $4 gajillion a month out of your own pocket, you can keep the shitty healthcare coverage you've had. Tap into that. And I tried. We pulled on it. That the job loss framing is superior to work requirement framing in the field, and electeds and staffers just didn't do it. They kept repeating work requirement, and they failed to understand. They failed to look at the data. Data is quite clear on this. They also failed to understand that there is something deeply, profoundly ableist in the fabric of this country, where work, if you are in a work frame, if that is the border in which you are operating, work is popular, it is virtuous, good people work, bad people don't work, layabouts don't work. You hear politicians who have enormous wealth from investments and inheritances, who aren't, working 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. as a ditch digger. You hear them talking about stuff like, well, idle hands. You know what they say about idle hands and the devil, right? Like, so we're just really bad at messaging, and we need to get better at it, because people are counting on us. There are lives on the line. It matters whether or not people can have healthcare coverage.
And what's so striking to me in the data that you have been working with at Data for Progress is just how strong the consensus is, even in a highly polarized society like ours, around protecting programs like Medicare and Medicaid, if not expanding them. And so while people may not understand right now that, the big murder bill has taken those things away from them, I do think they're going to understand it when it happens to them. And so I guess I'm wondering, like, do you think Republicans in the House and the Senate are going to face consequences for this from voters? And if not, why?
You're one of my heroes in the academy, and I hesitate to disagree with you, but I don't share your confidence that people are going to figure it out.
Okay. Oh God.
I know I'm a happy-go-lucky, good news them they today, and I'm sorry. One of my favorite senators is Elizabeth Warren, and I'm choking up a little bit because we were recently in her office. I was with families who came to Washington, D.C. These are families with medically complex and disabled children, the kind of children who are alive because of the fantastic advances in biomedical sciences that have happened in the last 20 to 30 years in this country. These are children who get to live at home. If you have children, just imagine for a moment someone comes to you and says, your kid has this disease. They can't live with you anymore. They're going to a hospital. Maybe it's an hour away. Maybe it's 2 hours away. You can visit whenever you want. They'll never be coming home. Like, just put yourself into that. Like, imagine that for a moment. And so these families, knowing that that is what they face, made the trek to DC with their kids and spent time begging and pleading and advocating and being a visible presence in making the people who would go to the floor of the House and the Senate to vote, making them look at their kids, even if it was just in the hallways, which, by the way, is a strategy deliberately employed because some of these people wouldn't give us meetings. And we met with Senator Warren, and she came out into her the front room of her office to just greet everyone and say hi to the kids and say hi to the parents and thank you. And then she did an interview with one of the kids, one of the families, and seeing a sitting United States senator when there are no cameras on, when there is no audience, it's just staff crying because she is scared for medically complex and disabled kids and is one of the smartest policy minds I've ever met. Is terrifying. And her office yesterday put out, it's on Instagram on the Send Warren account, a little timeline of when will Donald Trump's, quote, big, beautiful bill, end quote, go into effect. And what they've done is actually quite clever if your goal is to murder people. They have front-loaded the tax cuts so that those will kick in already. They've already kicked in. They've started. In November, when people do open enrollment for the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, or the ACA, that bill has way too many names. The premiums will be higher. At the end of this year, clean energy tax credits go away. So if you want solar on your roof, call your solar installer now because they've got a line. So on January 1, 2027, Medicaid starts getting hit really significantly. You'll see those job loss penalties instituted. You'll see a bunch of other stuff that will disproportionately hit the disability community. So if you're in 2 different states' computer systems for Medicaid, you're going to get kicked off. It doesn't it's just gratuitously cruel stuff. It's not like people are double dipping, by the way. It's like if you are the parent of a kid in Maryland and you are on a waiver service because all of the home care stuff we're talking about, it's optional. It's not required to be paid for by law. States don't have to do it. States do have to pay for nursing facility care, which is one of the most messed up public policy choices I've ever seen, right? Like we will force a state to pay for a Medicaid, force a state's Medicaid plan to pay for keeping a child away from their families in a oftentimes filthy, dangerous, unloving. It's like something out of a wire monkey experiment from the 60s, right? Like it's awful. We'll force states to pay for that. We won't force them to pay for home care. Home care is an optional service. And so to your question, one thing is we have a little bit of time to try to educate the public now that the bill is real and they can't lie about what's in it. Well, let me rephrase that because that's not true. They absolutely will lie about what's in it. We can point to the legislative text to the extent that truth matters anymore and say, no, actually, here's what you've done to Medicaid. Here are the ways you've harmed Medicaid. And we will see, before those Medicaid cuts really kick in, we'll see the healthcare service and delivery system that I and so many other Americans rely on to quite literally stay alive degrade even further. And so I do not live in hope anymore. What I say to families is, what I say to anyone who relies on Medicaid is, I am not done fighting. And I have absolutely no right, none whatsoever, to ask you to not give up, to ask you to stay in the fight, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because there is too much at stake, because we need you. You deserve to be here. And also, we need you. Like, your community needs you, your friends, your family, your neighbors. We need you in this country. And so the immediate message is, please don't give up. Please stay and fight if you can. And we have midterm elections coming up. I know that there are other fights that are important. I am not someone who believes that the only fight that matters is on election day. But we have an election coming up, and we are going to have state-based fights, because this is going to be a massive problem for the states. To be perfectly blunt, Medicare has a stronger, more politically powerful lobby. Old people vote is what it comes down to. Old people vote. Politicians know that. And so on Medicaid, you got to teach people what Medicaid is. You got to tell them why it's important to you, why it could be important to them if they don't care about you. But if they do care about you, it should be pretty obvious. And then we have to get better at messaging. We have to get better at, to put it bluntly, not buying into their propaganda, to putting out a clear explanation of why this stuff matters to people. Other people know. We have to stay in the face of state representatives and governors so that when they're making the draconian budget cuts that they're going to be forced to make, they harm Medicaid as little as possible. And we have to try as quickly as possible, if possible, to win the midterm elections and then rescind, pass a new piece of legislation, whatever that mechanism looks like based on the numbers. Undo Z, like Command Z. I want to undo the bill, right? And we're not. It's more complicated than that, but we have a chance to minimize the harm if we win the midterms.
Yeah, and I want to go back quickly, because you talked about not buying into the propaganda, and to put a fine point on Frank Lutz. I remember a former partner of mine used to say that that guy rebranded bad sex into 60 seconds of meditation every other Tuesday. But I had a lot of stress in my life in my 30s, man. Had a lot of stress in my life in my 30s. But anyhow, to the story you told earlier about being in, Senator Warren's, Senator Warren's office, and witnessing an elected official actually display empathy, which seems to be in short supply from elected officials these days. I'm wondering, how can members of the media, and however you define that, whether it's traditional, legacy, niche, or even podcasters such as we are, how can we help to truly illuminate true narratives of the disability community, as well as better narratives around healthcare and so forth, so we're not buying into the whole framing of, oh, this is it, these are entitlements that need to be cut as largesse from our budget here.
I do not know. And at the risk of sounding arrogant, that should be terrifying. I do this for a living, and I'm really fucking good at it. And maybe there are other people who do know the answer to that. But what I see right now is, when I'm scrolling YouTube Shorts, because I try to take in a deliberate, mindful, sort of stratified intake of content across platforms and niches and genres to try to be good at my job. And what I'm seeing now is YouTube Shorts that are completely AI. The script is written by ChatGPT. The video, it's not even pulled from a stock video site like Storyblocks or whatever it's called. It's now just generated by AI models. The video is AI generated, and the effect of AI produced content, text, but more importantly, photos, and even more importantly, video, is, I think, existential. I don't know how a democracy survives. I worked for a while for a guy named Adi Barkan, who co-founded an organization called To Be a Hero. Adi was diagnosed with ALS. He knew he was dying. He wanted to spend his remaining professional time fighting for Medicare for all, for healthcare as a human right in this country. And Adi, ALS took Adi's voice, and he was using eye gaze technology to type, and then a standard synthetic voice. And a Republican member of Congress was able to manipulate some video and audio of Adi. So they put words into his mouth. He was saying something he didn't say. And at that point, I knew we were in trouble, because the technology was rapidly, and I think it now is at the point where you can fool a large, I don't have data on this, but a non-trivial portion of the population using commonly available AI tools. This stuff may not fool you right now, give it another year, but it's fooling a non-trivial number of people now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what to do about that. We are in a crisis.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of what the tech expert Alondra Nelson has been saying about how we need a whole new field of study and how ignorance is actually actively produced by these systems. That it's not just that people don't know, it's that they are being made to not know, and that the information system itself is being polluted.
Dr. Nelson was, for a little while, running the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and wrote, her byline appeared over a post that was published at whitehouse.gov calling for clean air interventions at a time when the rest of the federal government was ignoring it. I am a huge fan of Dr. Nelson, and I think her take is exactly right. And also, if she had been in charge of science policy in the administration, the Biden administration, a lot more Americans would be alive right now.
Throughout this conversation, it strikes me that one of the defining sort of successful strategies of a lot of your work and the work of health advocates more broadly over the last decade has been to really surface the actual stories of patients and bring those into the halls of power. I think about the incredible organized fight against repealing Obamacare in 2017, 2018. In this kind of media environment, do you think that those truly personal, like real human stories still hold value and still have a possibility of advancing this agenda, or do we need new tools?
If anything is going to save us, if anything is still capable of saving us, if it isn't our own humanity, I don't know what it is. And so I made the decision in 2017 to trade away my personal privacy. I wasn't open about being chronically ill. I was told it was bad for my career. I was told, et cetera, et cetera. I might not be admitted to the bar. I made the decision to trade away my privacy on all of that in order to be a more effective advocate when Mike Pence said that healthcare was a matter of personal responsibility. And I stayed up all night and I made a video that was basically like, what the fuck did I do when I was 8 years old that was personally irresponsible to get myself to like have Crohn's disease? I think it is unfair to ask people to make that trade We do it anyway because it's the best tool we have. I would not be comfortable asking people to trade away their privacy, trade away the privacy of their kid. Like we can get deep into the bioethics weeds here, going back to my roots as in public health school, but you have parents who are essentially forced to make the decision to trade away the privacy of their medically complex children in order to try to save the lives of their medically complex children. It's a horrible, horrible thing we've done in this country. Yeah. No one should have to do it. And to be incredibly clear, my criticism is not of the parents, it's not of the families, it's not of myself. I've done it too. It's of a system that says we will not recognize your humanity. We will not recognize your we will literally not recognize your right to continue to life, your existence, unless you engage in this kind of advocacy. But to your point, it is some of the most effective advocacy I know of. And I think we have an obligation, a duty, to be as effective as we possibly can with the sacrifices, because it is a sacrifice, that chronically ill, disabled, medically complex people throughout this country are making in being public with their own stuff, their own story, their own experiences, their own diagnoses. And I think oftentimes we fall short. We collectively, the field, I have been deeply frustrated to see organizations that reach out into chronic illness communities, reach out to disabled folks, send out blasts, Facebook, all that sort of stuff to recruit storytellers, then using Trump talking points, like calling it the one big beautiful bill, calling it work requirements. I think we owe people who engage in that kind of advocacy better than that. I think we owe people more than an allegiance to a gerontocracy, to politicians who wouldn't know a TikTok. I am walking a very fine line in what I am saying publicly right now.
We appreciate your raw honesty today. We do.
One of the most important people on the Senate side for Democrats uses a flip phone. It's not a gimmick. He genuinely uses a flip phone. The senator from the great state of New York and the minority leader uses a flip phone. And it's not like there's a hidden iPhone and it's for folksy charm. He's using a flip phone. And he's also walking around imagining a family in Long Island. Not a real family. He's imagining them, and that's controlling his policy decisions. So against that backdrop, I think it's maybe the only chance we have is people who rely on healthcare, people who have a chronic illness, who maybe have multiple sclerosis or rheumatoid arthritis, who maybe have diabetes, who maybe have COPD, who maybe have sickle cell. Whatever it is, I think one of our best hopes, our only hopes, is people overcoming, wait for it, I'm not doing what you think, the stigma and the stigma that ableism puts on talking about having a chronic illness, and talking to friends, talking to family, talking to coworkers, talking to your faith community. Because 1 in 4 adults, according to the Centers for Disease Control before it was taken over in this country, has a disability. 1 in 4. And 25% of the population is a non-trivial percentage of the population. And if we are public about it, if we are public and we demand, because this is all happening against it's not a backdrop, it's happening against watching the federal government become explicitly eugenicist. If you are listening to this and you are not chronically ill, if you are not disabled, you should know right now it is the official policy of this regime that people who are chronically ill or disabled are fundamentally less worthy of life than people who are not disabled, who are not chronically ill. And you can see that policy alignment, that value. You can see that value play out in policy decision after policy decision after policy decision. And so, unfortunately, we don't have much of a choice right now. So the plea is, if this is something you care about, if it touches you, if it touches your family, you got to get in the game. I'm sorry. I am genuinely, you have no idea how sorry I am, but you got to get in the game. We need you. You have to help save yourself. Other people can't do it without you. There aren't enough of us if it's only the people who are on the field right now. We need more people to get engaged, to get involved. And it doesn't need to be a full-time job. It doesn't need to be your whole identity. I don't need you to make TikTok content every single day, right? I just need you to talk to people, to find an organization to connect with. And there are a lot of great organizations out there. Do not email me saying, Matthew, I can't go anywhere. I fucking know. Until 3 weeks ago, I couldn't leave my house until I got a new medication. I get that there are people who can't do it. If that is you, I am not talking to you. But if you can be a person who goes to the town hall that your member of Congress, that your United States senator, that your state representative, that your state senator, that your governor is having, if you can go to the town hall and stand up at the mic and with your voice quavering in just tunnel vision in the blood pounding in your head, because that's how it still feels for me. If you can say, I need Medicaid, how are we going to keep me from getting killed? What are we going to do? What's the game plan to keep our local hospital from closing? If you can be someone who shows up in public and has that message and puts a face so that your neighbors, your co-citizens, the people who are in your voting districts and your elected officials know, hey, that's Steve. We're not just talking about the hospital closing and oh, what are we going to do with the property? It's what is Steve going to do? Or Steve's kid has asthma and sometimes needs to be intubated because the inhaler doesn't work. And if that local hospital closes out in rural Vermont, out in rural Ohio, out in rural North Dakota, if the local hospital closes, the rural hospital closes, Steve either has to sell the farm and move closer to a hospital, or Steve has to take the risk that while speeding to the hospital 2 hours away in his F-150, he's going to watch his daughter die in his arms. That is where we are in this country. And I hate it. It's not the reality I would choose for any of us, but it is, please believe me when I tell you, where we are. And so the more people who get in the game, who talk about this stuff publicly, not just on social media, but who show up to the town halls, who show up to your local city council. If you are in a city that has hospitals that are in danger of closing, your city council ought to care. Oftentimes they do. You can be a voice that says, I want you as a voter, I want you to prioritize saving the hospital because that keeps my family alive, right? We need more people. We need more people who are actively engaged. And it sucks that in order to stay alive, you have to bully and cajole and beg But that is the timeline we are in 2025. You can connect with national organizations, get on some mailing lists. They send out alerts for actions that are happening. See if there's an organization in your state. I don't have a directory, but there are oftentimes in a state, there will be an organization that advocates for healthcare. See if they've got a mailing list, see if they're putting out blasts about calls to action, and then see what sorts of events your electeds are holding, and go and be an example. Be the first person who gets up and talks about healthcare, because you are creating a permission structure. You are giving other people in that room who feel like you do the permission to get up at the mic and say, yeah, actually, you know what? My mom has MS, and I don't know what's going to happen if the hospital closes, because that's where she sees Dr. Smith every other month. And I'm sorry that this is the timeline we are in. I hate it so much, but it is the timeline we are in.
Well, I can't think of a better place to end it than there. And I want to thank you for making such a clear ask at a time when it's really hard to make those. And thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, tremendous pleasure meeting you and tremendous conversation, Matthew. Thank you so much.
I am always happy, always genuinely ecstatic to run into someone else who understands that a non-trivial proportion of the problems the world deals with today are due to one man named Frank Luntz. And I will leave you with this thought. You are creating media. This is going to sound hackneyed and cliched, but you are being the change we need to see. And I am deeply grateful for that. But you were both trustworthy, reliable, not AI generated, and able to provide meaningful, accurate information to people. And the work you're doing is deeply, deeply appreciated.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for saying.
I am so thankful to Matthew for joining us for that conversation. Although really heavy, I feel like it's such a call to all of us about what we need to be doing in this moment, as scary as it is.
Yeah, I think, when I was listening to them speak, what I kept thinking about was the fact that it hope truly is a discipline. It's kind of like
Mm.
in sports, right? Where the greatest, like Asia Wilson, I'm thinking, she's the best player in the WNBA. Sorry, Caitlin Clark fans, but anyway, how she talks about how there's everybody is always talking about motivation. I need to be motivated. I need to be motivated. But what allows for greatness, what allows the pathway to greatness, I should say, is, discipline day in and day out. And I think that's the same with hope, right? It's, treated as a discipline, very similar to you know, what Matthew was saying. It's not necessarily that they certainly don't appear like they're like cheery with platitudes every single day, right? They're just
Mm-hmm.
waking up every day and doing the work day in and day out, day in and day out, with the hope, right, that eventually this work will cascade into something that leads to transformation. And I think that's the important thing, particularly for listeners of this podcast. It isn't that you know one particular action is going to get us to the point of where we want to be as a society, but it's the every little day things that we do collectively as well as individually that get us there.
Mm-hmm. And that we can keep doing it even when we acknowledge how much everything sucks.
Yes, absolutely. We can hold multiple things at the
Yes.
same time, right?
Yeah.
We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
So
It also reminds me of our recent conversation with Gabriel Teodros, who was kind of talking about this idea that it would be less hard to stand up and say these things if more people said them, right? And
mm,
and
yeah,
so it's necessary for all of us to stand up and say those things so that we can make it a little bit easier for everyone else to do it too, right? To take that load and make it a little bit lighter for everyone else.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, speaking of discipline and people saying things that need to be said, Nora, why don't we move into our 8 ounces of joy for this episode? Would you like to go first or
Sure.
last, or where would you go ahead and go first? Yeah.
Mine is very small this week, but, I have a kid who's 8 and who is a big reader, which is just a joy in and of itself, but this week, we started reading my favorite kids' book, which is Haroun and the Sea of Stories by Salman Rushdie, um,
Yes.
and I feel like I've been waiting, like, a decade to read this book with them, and it's so cool. I love those milestones that you don't expect to happen, and then you look up and you're sitting in bed with your kid and, like, reading words that meant so much to you, and
Yeah.
yeah, small joys.
Yeah. It's also good to know that you are adding to the literacy of this country. It seems
Wow,
like it's within
trying.
the time.
It's hard to compete with YouTube.
One, one person at a time, one soul at a time. Okay. Um, Mine is kind of similarly small, I suppose, in terms of it's an interpersonal thing. The other day, my partner had a friend over and her friend's partner, and we were sitting down talking, and this guy is like to the left of Pluto, right? He's like he makes Bernie Sanders look like an intern in Reaganomics or something, right? And um we get done talking and we have this wonderful conversation and we're not just talking about politics, but we're talking about just life and goals and sharing about our childhood. And you know, the next day, he communicates that was just such a great experience in the sense that he's a 42-year-old man, doesn't have a ton of friends, and was just recognizing that even at this age, right, you can open up and have conversations and be vulnerable, right?
Mhm,
And welcome other people into their life, into new people, I should say, into your life, particularly, in a time period where even, right, folks who are very much situated on the left, I think we still, as, those who are identify as men, we still have this conditioning, right, where even though our politics may be, again, to the left of Pluto, right, we still sort of many times fall under the spell of, oh, you have to be hardened and there are things that you can't talk about, right?
mm,
And I think, again, I mean, we talked earlier about this on another episode, but the sort of crisis of friendship and the false narrative, if you will, of what masculinity is. And I just thought it was such a hardening thing to see, somebody even at, I believe he's maybe a year older than me, so 45, come to this realization that it's never too late, right? To
yeah,
be able to open yourself and learn new things and have a new friend in life. So
yeah,
yeah,
and bravo you for making that space for him.
it helps with the little, Parrot Bay rum, I gotta say, but, you know, anyhow, with that being said, and no, that was not a product placement. With that
We get no endorsements.
nothing else, nothing else. With that being said, let me go ahead and read us out. We want to, of course, thank you, audience, for joining us for another week of In the Meanwhile. A huge thanks to our patient and perceptive producer, Jessica Partnow. Look at all that alliteration. That was written by Nora, I'll have you know. Our, our music is from the amazing Aham Aluo. You can find and follow us on your favorite podcast platform, or on YouTube, Instagram, or Blue Sky. New episodes drop every Friday. And until then, we'll see you in the meanwhile.